Are you ready to learn how to start your own virtual assistant business or virtual assistant agency this 2025? In this video, I'm going to dive through the step-by-step process that you can take if you're thinking of starting your own virtual assistant business this year. Now, you might be wondering why someone who runs a virtual assistant agency, my baby 2XU, is going to make a video on how to do it. I don't think of it in a way that you guys are going to become my competitor. I think of it as a way where you can become someone who helps me get a million Filipinos working from home. It could be someone who is just sharing to other people the opportunity of being able to work remotely. So that's kind of how I've always looked at it. That's why I have so many friends who are owners of virtual assistant agencies, who are in this space, because we're kind of working towards the same thing, which is helping more people have the opportunities that they need to match basically the life that they want. Now, a couple of common myths that I do want to bust right on the get-go. The first one is that you need to be a VA to start a virtual assistant agency. It helps mostly because, it'll give you a little bit of the structure of what that looks like, but you don't really have to. So for example, for me, that's a common misconception people have with me. It's like, hey, I was a VA for a while. I'm like, no, I actually started out with a course on how to hire a virtual assistant because I wanted to help foreigners at that time hire Filipinos. And I kind of learned a lot of the structure from there. And then that's kind of what I used for 2XU. So I didn't have virtual assistant experience per se, but I was able to translate that because I knew how to create systems. So you don't have to have that background. It's really up to you. And the next myth that I want to bust is that you need a lot of capital when you're starting an agency. And to be honest, for me, it was the same thing. I did not need any of it. And I've seen a lot of other virtual assistant agencies where they didn't really need it, other than maybe their own credit card, just so they can charge some of the software ahead to that card. But for example, for me, I was still doing the course basically when we had our very first client. It came from one of the students that we were talking to, like, hey, I like your course, but I don't want to do the hiring and everything else. And we were like, okay, we can create a business out of it. So I started to exceed from that scratch basically, where we did have a little bit of structure already on just the email, and we also had the structure on like how to monitor online employees, because at that time, right before that, I was running a book publishing company and we already had that structure, so it's easy for me to translate that into 2XU. That's why I'm saying you might just need a credit card maybe just to kind of create your couple of work emails. But even then, if it's not necessary to you, then it should be fine to just start with Gmail and start, recruiting and finding people. Really depends on what makes sense to you. Really depends on what you want your business to look like, but you do not need the capital, because the cool thing is you can ask for a deposit from the potential client, or they pay you ahead before you find the EA. Or it could be that just because you're kind of the only one looking for them, it might just be a little bit of your time and effort to find your first client, to find the first assistant you're hiring for them. Next is the myth that you need a lot of connections. And to be honest, for me, when I started out, I was 23. I didn't really have connections. I didn't really know anyone. That's kind of partly why I did the course, was to start a network. And even then, it wasn't really that big, or as big as it is now. And the fun thing is, once you kind of know what kind of business you want to go into and you already have a couple of clients, it's easier to make connections, because then you're starting to create friends inside of the business, inside of the industry, and you get to have this little community of other people who then can refer you, so on and so forth. So you do not need a lot of connections. You just need, honestly, cheesy enough, the right one. Next is the myth that the market is oversaturated. Now, the reality of that is not really, to be honest, mostly because every single day, there's new businesses that are creating recurring revenue. Every single day, those same entrepreneurs need an assistant. So just because you and your best friend separately started a virtual assistant agency doesn't mean that you guys have to, one, target the same people, and two, will run out of clients, because that's kind of the reality of it, is that there's so many different types of people in the world that you can specifically target for when it comes to having a virtual assistant match with them. So not really oversaturated. Might feel that way just because there's a lot, but it's the same thing with every coffee shop business, same thing with every restaurant. It's the same thing with any type of online store. There's a ton of them. It really depends on what you're selling and who you're selling it to. And finally, the myth that any virtual assistant can work with any client. That's just untrue in the long term. Like, you can match someone who has experience with a client because the client needed it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that personality-wise, character-wise, that they're gonna work out together. We've done that so many times in 2XU, where we have a client who is matched with an EA because they're really looking forward to their skills of how they can add to the business, but in reality their values weren't aligned. Their expectations weren't really fully set. And for us, like, we literally do a deep dive on both the EA and the client to set expectations, but sometimes it just wasn't a match personality wise. So just because, again, an EA has been there for like 10 years, but if the client isn't a match personality, character wise, value wise, it's just not going to turn out in the long run. So as you're searching for an assistant for your current client, just keep that in mind, that hey, maybe they're not a match on this end, so I have to make sure that they're actually really a good match before I officially pair them up. Now, how do you actually start a virtual assistant business? The first one is to figure out who you want to serve. Like I said earlier, the market is not oversaturated. It really depends on who you're going to target. For me, when I started, it was super easy for me to start targeting authors and coaches. Authors mostly because I did have a book publishing company before, so I knew exactly what the process was for them, from editing to publishing to marketing to ongoing supporting them. I knew what that process looked like. And the second set of people that we were targeting were coaches, because they were very much the same. And at the time, I was a career coach basically for a lot of virtual assistants who wanted to be a virtual assistant. So I knew what that process or that need looked like. So I understood the industry, I understood the niche that I was going into, because either I had direct experience myself or I worked with a lot of those types of people before. So as you're starting to think like, who do I want to target, just look at those factors. So like, what is a role basically, or what is a niche or a target market that you understand how their process works. So for you, when it comes to supporting the virtual assistant, to support them, it's going to be easy for you to coach them. It's going to be easy for you to create processes for them and with them. It's going to make the whole thing just a little bit lighter, because you understand truly what that industry is and what would they need from an assistant. Next is you want to outline your service and your differentiator. So what I mean is, you don't need to have the whole process written out. It literally could just be, hey, this is how we kind of roughly do sales calls. Like, hey, this is how we onboard a new client. This is how we onboard their EA. This is, the month to month, how we take care of them, and quarterly, yearly, whatever that looks like. You're just creating an outline. And of course, you can use ChatGPT to do that, especially if you've already found out your differentiator. So what that means is what sets you apart from other virtual assistant businesses. What's a particular service that you do? So for example, they just call themselves like, hey, we're lead gen virtual assistants, we're marketing virtual assistants, we're writing virtual assistants. It could be, for example, for 2XU, ours is like, hey, we're operations executive assistants. We train your assistant to become the head of your operations. And that is true. And that's happened multiple times inside of 2XU. So whatever that looks like for you, it's finding what would set you apart from your target audience, because it's a little bit easier to target them as well, and to start outlining what that service could actually look like. Just has to be like just the skeleton. You'll start filling out the meat later on. But the point is that when you start networking, which is the next step, start networking or doing outreach, you have something to talk about for your target audience. Now for me, what that looked like is I got on stage a lot. That was kind of the reality of it, is I would go on stage, I would talk to them about how to have an assistant, or how to manage an assistant, or how to be able to succeed with an assistant. And that was kind of my network, is I would keep showing up on stage. And of course, afterwards, I would talk to a lot of the people. I would talk to the other speakers. We would have speakers dinner. So that was kind of my shortcut when it came to networking. Now, if that doesn't work for you, you can start kind of honing in your skill on networking just by going to local events and then starting to look for Zoom or online events that you can attend, especially if your target audience isn't in your country. So for example, for me, none of my target audience is in the Philippines. I know it is in the US and the UK. Hence why for me, speaking on stage with people from the US, from the UK makes the most sense, because they're kind of coming to me and then I get to meet them in person, which is another layer of kind of just friendship with that person, versus like, hey, it's all been virtual. Now when it comes to outreach, you can of course go on LinkedIn and start looking at your target audience and start picking out like, hey, this person probably needs an assistant. It's grabbing their email. It's not just pitching them on LinkedIn. You want to give them some sort of value first in the first email, so then they would want to keep responding to you and they would realize, oh yeah, I do need an assistant. So that's kind of the process that I like doing, is I like looking at someone's LinkedIn profile of like, hey, I noticed that you're not consistent on your content and you keep saying that you want to be consistent. So I look at their posts of like, hey, I see that this is a bottleneck for you based on your LinkedIn post. How can I help? So it's going ahead and becoming an FBI agent and finding out who needs your service and specifically why. Next, and I already mentioned this, is for a while, you might want to just get paid when you match someone already with an assistant. So what I mean by that is, let's say, because it's more of a chicken and the egg thing. Let's say you already have an assistant who's available and you match them with a client, or you already have a client and you're trying to find them an assistant. Depending on what works for you as a service, basically, is you might have the client say like, hey, since I'm just starting out, you can pay me once you actually have the assistant, and that will be for their first month. There's not a recruitment fee or a placement fee. It really is just that once you are matched with an EA, that's when I make my money. So that's just one of the ways that if you're really not that confident yet to ask for a deposit, like that's what we do at 2XU, is we ask for a deposit for the first month. We don't charge a recruitment fee or a placement fee. It's really just like, hey, we guarantee we're gonna find you a really good assistant if you pay us 1 month upfront. So that's kind of a little bit of how we work. And if we don't find them an assistant, which is rare, then we actually go ahead and refund them that deposit. That's why it's called the deposit. So whatever that works for you, just kind of keep that in mind, that for some clients who have already worked with virtual assistant agencies before, they might have gotten burned by them or they just don't trust them as much. So for you, you want to build that trust in whatever way that you can, but not compromising how your business is going to scale and grow. Next is then you want to start going ahead and testing your systems. It's as you start getting clients and matching them with their assistant, is you then want to make sure that the outline that you wrote out is, one, constantly updated, and two, documented if there's any other changes that, or additions basically, that you add to your service and how you do certain things. And for me, I did not do this as well at the beginning of 2XU just because everything louder and everything else. However, I really recommend that you do it, or if you have your own assistant, do it. That way you are constantly giving your client repeatable results, and it's not sporadic results on just based on what you remember that the process is supposed to look like that day. Next is starting to get feedback or reviews or case studies. So this is the key thing for you to keep scaling, is you need to have some sort of feedback that you can post on social media, on your website, or some way that you can also keep improving. So it's not just about getting feedback just so you can post it online, but it's also getting feedback so you know what to change, what matters to your clients, what makes sense for them. You're able to modify how you run the business based off what they say is amazing about you and what are the things that they get frustrated by. So then you can do more of what is amazing and do less of what are the things that they get frustrated by. Next is you want to then start hiring your team. Now for me, I started my first virtual assistant exclusively just for 2XU at about the third client count. It was when it was like, okay, someone's been paying us for about 4 months. 2 other people have been paying us for about 2 months. And I can see how I can ramp up and support these people better and better. I got an assistant for myself. So that was kind of the first hire that I got because, living to what we preach. Then it was getting to the point of like, hey, at this level, which is usually around the 6 or 7 people mark, we should hire a manager. I didn't do that. I made that mistake where I was managing, I think, 15 people at that time, all on my own, and you should not do that. Because other than that, I was also managing 15 clients at the same time. That led to 1 burnout, 2 people quitting because I could not take care of them. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind of like, oh yeah, we've now hit 7 employees. I want to start thinking of, or even way before, start thinking of hiring a manager, or like, hey, this EA, and this has happened where their client left because of X, Y, and Z reason. I now want to train them up to manage the other EA. So whatever that looks like, whatever makes sense, is you want to start looking at, okay, how can I better support my team without burning myself out? And it's getting people to manage them and take care of them better than you can, because your managers are not going to be concerned about sales. They're not going to be concerned about like invoicing or anything else. Their focus is just taking care of their assistants. So then they can take care of them better than you ever can, which frees you up as well to keep focusing on growing the business. It's the same thing with hiring a client success manager later on, of someone who can take care of your clients as well. Same logic, same feeling of like, hey, they can take care of the clients better than I did because they're not worried about the rest of the business. I get to worry about that. That's my responsibility as the business owner. So it's kind of just hiring out roles that normally, as you grow, you do want to hire for, and having them take care of that outcome instead of you focus on that outcome and the rest of the business as well. Next is then with your team, you can start documenting more and more of the systems. So just always keep that in mind, is to constantly update and document your standard operating procedures. For me in 2XU, I love mind mapping them. So then for every single step in the process, people can easily click on the SOP and know what they're supposed to do next. It could be video, it could be a, just a Google document, whatever makes sense for your business. Just kind of making sure I'm really iterating the part that you do need to have systems so you can create repeatable results for your clients. And of course, it makes it easier to keep upgrading. It makes it easier to have systems to know what you want to improve, to know what you want to upgrade or what you want to add into the business, because you do have it documented, written down, and you're starting to build more and more of what you want your business to look like and how you want it to grow. And finally, start marketing and iterate. Now, it's funny to say that marketing is last on this list, but it's the reality of it, is you do need to have a couple of feedback from your client. You do need to have some kind of list a little bit of what would be things that your target audience could be looking for based on your current clients to even start marketing. So for example, for me at 2XU, we kind of already had a little bit of marketing, but it was mostly kind of iterating on videos that I did on YouTube like this one, but we didn't really pull out all the stops until around the second year mark, when we had the feedback from the clients, when we had consistent kind of revenue to also pay for someone to do marketing. And it took a while to actually really get there, but it kind of makes it easier for you to start marketing your business when you do have enough to market. It's not just like the you solopreneur, like, hey, I'll find you an assistant. Like, hey, we have a XYZ number of assistants right now. We have these many clients at the moment, and I want to start growing that. I want to start scaling that. So whatever that looks like for you in your business, that's what I recommend, is you start marketing as you have gone through a little bit of the trial by fire of starting your own business, and then you have something to market. And of course, like I said, iterate. Is you will always find things to improve, to do better. You have to also keep in mind to just not innovate something just because it seemed something that would be cool, or just for the sake of innovation. You want to innovate something because it moves something forward, because it makes things a little bit easier, either for you, for the assistants, for your team, for your clients, whatever that looks like for you. It's constantly finding ways to make other people's jobs a little bit easier, and that's kind of your responsibility as a business owner too. Now, I am excited to see you guys start your own virtual assistant business. So if you guys like this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button right there. Comment below, what kind of virtual assistant agency are you going to start? I would love to know. And if you still haven't yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button right there so you don't miss any of my videos every Sunday and Thursday on how to work from home and how to have a business from home, which you guys can check out the Soup playlist right here and the latest video right here. Hope you guys have an amazing day, and remember that small steps matters, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!